about one of my favorite topics in both life and business, which is Instagram. Specifically, we're going to be discussing how to harness the power of Instagram stories. My name, as Kendall mentioned, is Quinn Tempest, and yes, that is my real name. I'm hoping to be in the running to become Marvel's next superhero, mainly just because I want to have my own action figure, and I think the royalty checks could be probably pretty good with all these new Avengers movies coming out. But for now, my only superpowers are digital marketing strategy and graphic design. I really come from a corporate content marketing background where I worked on large-scale enterprise-level content marketing strategies, but my heart always has lied with the little guys, with the small business owners, local businesses, entrepreneurs. So that's really where you're going to find me now, helping those people bring their brand to life online through logo design, web design, digital strategy, and I do a lot of speaking. As I mentioned earlier, I am calling from downtown Phoenix. I am here in my home office right now, and I'm also a car-free urbanista. So I've lived car-free in Phoenix for the past 5 years and very active in the community here in downtown Phoenix. So I'm very excited to join you all today, and thanks for tuning in. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, I want to talk with you about two things: the absolute power that Instagram stories holds for brands and local businesses, and give you some actionable insights into how you can create your own winning story strategy. How does that sound? Put something in the chat. Does that sound good? Is that something you're interested in? Hopefully, because you signed on, you're getting it now, whether you like it or not. So it sounds like, okay, you're good. Great. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I kind of want to set the stage with a few numbers because I really want you to see how influential stories have been, currently are, and where they're going in 2019 and beyond. So the first number is 1 billion. Now, this is the number of users now on Instagram as a whole, and this was announced last June in 2018. Now, I mainly bring this up to mention the second number and to contrast it with that. And that number, as you can see here, is 500 million. So exactly half the number of users on Instagram as a whole are using Instagram stories daily. Now, to put that into perspective for you, June of last year was when we heard from Instagram that they hit the 1 billion mark. At that time, they also told us that stories had 400 million users. So from June to about January, February, where we heard about 500 million users, it ballooned over 100 million users on stories. So this just goes to show you that this platform has taken up a lot of real estate on the top of the screen and a lot of attention for users using Instagram. And we've seen quite a big shift over the past 6 months, 8 months, even a year, of people really moving towards stories as their preferred way of content consumption on this platform. And so do you guys remember, put it in, and I know you do, but how many of you used Snapchat back in the day? Anyone? Pop it in. I tried it for about a week, and it just wasn't really my thing. I think I sent a couple of things to close friends. No, a couple of you did. So the crazy thing about Snapchat is that it was really the precursor to Instagram stories. But as you can see from this graph, within 9 months of Instagram stories coming out, it surpassed Snapchat's amount of daily users. Now, what Snapchat didn't do so well was to really gain traction with a lot of us, with business owners, with brands, who were really looking for a way to create relationships and nurture them with their audience. Snapchat just really fell flat there. But Instagram stories was really the first chance for that shift to start happening. And that's why Instagram was very, very popular from the beginning. And we can also make a perfect business case for Instagram stories. A couple of numbers that I was surprised to find: 1/3 of the most viewed stories actually come from business accounts. So people aren't just looking at their friends' selfies. They're not just looking at what their mom ate for lunch today, although they probably are. They're actively engaging with businesses every single day. Secondly, 20% of stories actually get a direct message reply. So not only are people engaging with businesses, they're directly interacting with them. And I think this is one of the most unique things about Instagram stories, is that there's a direct connection between brands and customers, and there can be a relationship there created very easily. And it's just, we never had that access as consumers to businesses and to brands that we like. So this has really changed the game for a lot of businesses out there. Now, one of the stats that I had not found from Instagram was how much time people are spending on different parts of the platform. They have not released any of this data yet. So I did an informal poll of my followers. I have about 8,500 followers. And by the way, I think I forgot to mention my handle. If you learned anything today, if you got a good tip or good insight, get really meta with me and post something on Instagram stories about Instagram stories. And remember to tag me so I can share it later or see it. I'm quinn.tempest, and you can find me there. So I did an informal poll. I had about 250 people answer it. And I had asked the question, do you spend more time viewing content on stories or the regular feed? I was surprised to see that 75% of people spend more time on stories than on the feed. And I would say, even if I had asked this 6-7 months ago, it would have been more equal. But people are really gravitating towards this part of the platform. We'll talk about the reasons why, and this makes it that much more important for businesses to take advantage of this part of the platform. Now, meanwhile, alongside this meteoric rise of stories, and likely I'm going to argue because of it, Instagram has become much more than a social media platform. Do you guys agree? Pop it in the chat. I think it's now become an absolute cultural phenomenon. Even veritable institutions, which is a joke, like Urban Dictionary, even have an entry on doing it for the gram, which just makes me laugh. Now, if you guys don't know what this is, come down to downtown Phoenix on a Saturday, come to Roosevelt Row, and you're gonna see hundreds of people doing it for the gram, where all the murals are. And I'm sure wherever you are, Prescott, Flagstaff, Tempe, there's hotspots for Instagram. So it's really changed the way we interact with our built environment as well. And then we see journalistic publications asking hard-hitting questions like, why are fancy bathrooms all over Instagram? This is a good question. I think the answer is, why the hell not? But we're starting to see how Instagram is influencing everything from design to how we travel to how we connect to so many different facets of our life. And yes, my friends, you can see here on the right, even I have done it for the gram in a really cute bathroom, and I don't regret it. And of course, just to have one more little piece of fun before we get into the nitty-gritty, just when you think things couldn't get any weirder, there are now things called Instagram museums. Now, I don't have my slide progressions on, so I'll kind of move some things here, but we have this crazy one where a guy literally paid to sit in an egg-shaped toilet and have his photo taken. And then we also have this couple here that decided to take their engagement photos in the ice cream museum. And then recently there was one here in Phoenix that was basically like a glow-in-the-dark adult ball pit where you go and like take videos in this weird ball pit. And all I can think of was like germs, like there's so many germs. But I just wanted to have some fun with you guys. We got to keep it lighthearted when we're talking about Instagram. So in all seriousness, Instagram is this wild and wacky place that has grown exponentially in influence and power over the past few years, alongside of, and I will argue, because of the rise of stories. There are really huge opportunities on this part of the platform if, and that's my big caveat, if you know how to use it properly. So here's the big caveat, and we'll talk specifics after this. Instagram must be an extension of your content marketing strategy. And what's the biggest thing when it comes to content marketing? Well, I'll answer that for you. It's not about you. Content marketing is about your audience. It's about your prospects. It's about your customers. It's about providing helpful, useful information that they are looking for, whether it's to educate them, to entertain them, to inspire them, to ignite them to take action. Whatever it is, Instagram isn't just about pretty pictures. It's about bringing your brand purpose to life. So with that reminder in mind, I want to give you my definition of Instagram marketing so that we're all working under the same understanding of what it is for the next 30, 40 minutes. So here it is. You might want to take a picture of this. This would be a great Instagram story opportunity here. Here's my definition. Instagram marketing is an interactive experience of your brand that is creatively presented and strategically planned in order to build a relationship with your audience. It's about finding that sweet spot of balance between art and strategy, and always remember that building trust is the key to long-lasting relationships on the gram. So that's your definition, and that's what I want you to remember as we move through all the nitty-gritty tactics. So one of the biggest questions I get asked, and by the way, if you have questions that pop up during this chat, just go ahead and put them in the chat box. Kendall's going to ask them to me after I'm done. So we'll get to those at the end. So one of the big questions I get is, well, what's the difference between the original feed and the stories? How do you need to adjust your strategy to work for both parts of the platform? Now, Instagram actually did a lot of the legwork to answer this question for us. They did a big global study and they released their findings on what users expect on different parts of the platform. So let's start with the feed. Now, the feed should almost feel like a landing page for your business. It should be curated for discovery so that in one little instant, when someone lands on your profile, they get an overall feel and picture of what it is you're all about. So the feed should really be about introducing people to or sharing updates on your brand in a curated manner, which is slightly different than stories. Stories, on the other hand, is about engaging your audience more deeply through real-time, authentic content. This is where you can be a bit looser, a bit more off the cuff. It's where you can let your audience peek through the curtains and see behind the scenes of your business, and they can really get to know your brand purpose even more. Now, does that mean that stories can't be curated or can't be planned out? No. That's not what I mean at all. In fact, I encourage you to plan your content strategically, but just understand that the expectations of most users on Instagram is that stories shouldn't feel as perfect. And we're going to see a little bit more of why that is. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just change my screen here because I want to go full screen. So just bear with me for a second as I change this, because I want you to be able to see my videos on here, and I had kind of forgotten about that. So let me go full screen. Okay, much better. So stories, like I said, a little bit more off the cuff. You can see here I've got a video playing of my own profile where, although I do plan out my content in advance, I have a lot of good, juicy educational resources here. So let's talk about the different reasons that people like and are gravitating to stories. Now, based on that poll that I did a little bit earlier, I also asked the people who said I like stories better, why? So here are some of the answers. They said, well, it's easier to navigate through stories versus the feed, which is interesting because it's kind of just a different thumb movement, right? It's over or down, but a lot of people find it much more easy to navigate by just swiping through stories. The other thing I heard a lot is that it feels more personal and that people love seeing behind the scenes. I think more and more people are wanting transparency and authenticity, and story seems to be the perfect format for that to happen. Another thing is that it's quick, it's visual, it's not sitting there and reading a long caption on a huge long feed. It's a little bit more like digestible content. My favorite answer is the last one though, that it seems more timely, and my favorite phrase, less algorithmy. I think unfortunately the algorithm has changed so much, and even in the past month, honestly, folks, it has drastically changed to a point where it feels like it's a bit of a game, where you have to do everything exactly right just to get your content to be seen. Stories is not there yet. I'm not sure it will ever be. We'll see. But stories feels more authentic. It feels less algorithmy, even though it functions with an algorithm, it doesn't feel the same as the feed. And that is one of the biggest reasons people are gravitating towards it. So when we want to summarize this, I just want to tell you that you do want to treat them differently and understand what people expect. Is that the feed should be timeless, it should feel evergreen, it should feel really curated for discovery, just like a landing page would, whereas stories can feel a little bit more authentic, a little bit more in the moment. And this is where you can really nurture that relationship by creating lots and lots of engagement right on the platform. So another question I get asked all the time is, what should we post? What kind of content should we create for stories? What format should we use? And I'm going to just give you a little warning that before you jump into specific content types, before you jump into formats, you really need to dig deep into what your brand purpose is and what your true deep messaging is, because that is what works on Instagram. That authentic expression of a deeper purpose, whether you're a huge enterprise level client, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a local bakery, whatever it is, what is that deeper purpose? So instead of telling you what kind of content to create, I want to help you figure out that message first. So I have a quick 3-question framework to help you do that. The first question is this: what does your audience care about? That is a really important question, because we want to make sure that we're digging deep into the pain points that your audience has and how you can help them and give them what they're looking for. So look into your existing audience insights, your competitive analysis, and really dig deep into what it is your audience is looking for. Number 2, what makes you unique? We've all seen the Instagram accounts that look exactly the same, similar stock photos, similar messaging, but on Instagram, you do need to carve out your unique niche. So ask yourself, what makes you stand out over XYZ competitor? Go look at your competitors and what they're doing on Instagram and see how you can find that unique little differentiation that you have, because this will really draw the people in who want to follow you. The third is probably the most important, and that is, what does your brand stand for? What is the deeper purpose behind your business? And what is really the impact that you want to make? At the intersection of these 3 questions is what I call your story ethos. It could even be your Instagram ethos. Oftentimes, even this ethos can come into play on content off the platform too. But it's so important for Instagram stories to understand what your audience wants, what makes you stand out, and why in the world you're doing this in the first place. What's your deeper purpose as a brand? So I want to show you 3 examples on different types of ethos statements. So this first one is really the ethos of inspiration. This is Matter. They are a clothing company that, on their bio, they actually say, we interpret textile heritage into prints that tell stories of where and why they are made. So their Instagram stories are really insightful. This story here, they went to their factory in India and they actually toured the grounds. They talked to employees. They showed the looms that they made. They talked about what they ate for lunch today. It really gave a behind the scenes look at what they do and why they do it. You can do this for your business here in Arizona too. Just take that ethos and understand how you can then translate that into different story formats, which we'll talk about in a second. Another example is an entertainment ethos. Hopper, I don't know if you guys know it, but it's a company that helps you find low fares for air flights. And their whole Instagram is mainly about recruiting new employees and building their brand awareness. So this is a really fun story that they did of their employee retreat, where they captured all the fun stuff that these people do, including these like weird hamster ball things, which looks so much fun. And their ethos is really to keep it light, to entertain, and to raise their awareness to really recruit new employees. I'm going to bring my in for Eduthos because this is really all what I do. I'm doing it right now. I help small business owners and entrepreneurs bring their unique purpose to life online. So a lot of my stories are educational, like this one, 5 tips for Instagram marketing in 2019. So you really want to understand what that ethos is at the intersection of those 3 questions, because that will inform all of the content that you create. So what are the formats available to you? There's so many different types of stories you can do. One of my favorites is the day in the life. This works really well if you have a personal brand or you're an entrepreneur really trying to build your business. But you can also, if you have a larger business, do team profiles or do an event recap or a capture or even a giveaway or a contest. These are just some general ideas of how you can take that ethos and translate it into Instagram story formats. Just a few ideas for you here. I could probably go all day and do a whole nother session on just that. But I do think a lot of brands jump right into the tactics and the formats, and they completely miss the messaging and the ethos. And that is what really makes you stand out on Instagram specifically. So I'm going to grab a drink of water and I'm going to close out of my full screen just to check that you guys can see everything. It looks like you can. All right, I just want to make sure because the full screen I can't see anything, and I was like, I don't know if I'm talking to myself and this is very weird or if you guys are still here, but it looks like you're still here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come full screen again. Let me change my settings here. Thanks for bearing with me. Full screen. There we go. And we're going to get into some nitty gritty here. So feel free to pop your questions in because I see some of them and we'll get to them after. All right. So I want to get into some nitty gritty now that we understand both the impact of Instagram as well as what you need to do to stand out. I want to talk about 10 specific things that you can do to start getting your story strategy implemented, or if you're already using stories, take it to that next level. My first tip is to master the art of vertical storytelling. So this is really a 2-parter. First, vertical video, vertical photos, vertical everything. This is a new-ish format that we must master. It's very different than a couple years ago when I would make fun of people for taking vertical video. But now this is going to be the new format. And so we need to actually produce the content in vertical and edit it in vertical and stay throughout that, because that is just the new name of the game. The second part of this is storytelling. And what's the biggest part of a story? Well, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So when you're thinking about doing a story, here's an example for you from one of my favorite clothing brands. They started off with an introduction, a few tips on how to eat well while traveling. So they're telling you what they're going to tell you. And then they move into the actual tips. So here's one of them. And then at the end, they kind of wrap it up and have a call to action to go to a blog. So now, does every story need to be exactly like this? No. Most of the time, my own personal Instagram, I'm more of a day in the life kind of business, so I tend to keep it loose. But once in a while, I'll really hone in on something like this when I want to make a big impact. So think about the beginning, middle, and end, or at least the major intention of why you're creating a story in the first place. Number 2 is to understand your analytics. And the Instagram story analytics are a little tricky because they can be a bit misleading. For example, when you see people tapping through your story, it will show up as a forward analytics. You can see here there's forward as well as back. Now, forward is not a bad thing. You kind of assume, oh, that means they want to go through quickly and they're not that engaged. That's not what it means at all. You actually want to encourage people to tap through your Instagram stories. And usually that means they're more engaged than not because they're actively going through it. The back analytic point is actually really great too, because that shows they're super engaged because maybe they missed something and they want to go backwards to make sure that they saw it. The couple of stats and KPIs here that you might want to keep an eye on are next story. So that's a swipe motion. That means they're kind of bored, they're kind of over it, and they want to move on. So if you start to see that amping up, you want to take that as insight to ask yourself why. And then the fourth one is exited. That doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't interested. Maybe they were like at work and they just needed to like come back to it later, so they swiped out of Instagram stories altogether. So just understand your analytics, know that back and forward means really good engagement, and understand that that will actually be good for you in the long run. Number 3 is to create a visual strategy. We all kind of know this about the Instagram original feed, that having a specific aesthetic that translates your brand look and feel is really important. Although I think there was an article, I haven't read it yet, there was an article last week from The Atlantic that says the Instagram aesthetic is dead. I don't quite agree with the headline, but I haven't read it, so I'm gonna have to check that out. But creating a visual strategy on Instagram stories now, that is really, really important because you want to almost have it feel like as soon as an Instagram story pops up, even if they don't know it's your brand, your business, they can identify it by the look. That might just be picking up color palette that translates from your logo, from your branding, or having a specific background or using specific fonts. You don't have to spend hours on this, but at least pick colors, fonts, and style so that it does look a little bit more cohesive. Number 4 is to use stickers. I honestly think this is the most powerful part of Instagram stories and why Instagram stories has become so darn effective for businesses, because you can interact with your audience directly like on no other platform. Like I don't know any other platform where you can do something like this, although Facebook has been taking some of the stuff that Instagram's been doing since they're the same general company. So for example, the poll that I did, I asked a lot of questions, I got a lot of great data, I learned a lot about my audience, and now I'm able to fine tune my content based on their answers. So use stickers, use polls, use questions. There's a new format that just came out last week called quizzes, which is even cooler. So really take advantage of this because this is one of the biggest differentiators of Instagram versus every other platform. Also, now there's not as much opportunity to be discovered with Instagram stories, but there are some. So for example, you can see my video here. I'm using a hashtag as well as I'm popping in a location tag. These are both options to help me be discovered on my profile. If you are a local business, absolutely use this. You can use both your actual location or you can use the general vicinity. You can absolutely attract more people this way because your stories will show up on the hashtag page or the actual location page. So although, like I said, Instagram stories isn't the best place for a mass discovery, you can trickle in quite a few new people through it. The feed is still really the best for that though. Number 6 is to create a highlight strategy. So highlights, in case you're not familiar, are these little circles at the bottom of the profile here. And they are things that you can save for future reference. So this is a shop. I think it's in New York, yeah, in Brooklyn. It's a package-free shop. So a lot of their highlights are just product questions or frequently asked questions or shipping FAQs. And those are the things that they say because that was the most relevant thing for their business. For me personally, I do more of my education. So I save any mini lessons that I've shared as well as anything that I want to promote. I've seen other companies with an inspiration ethos kind of have different sections for different types of inspiration, like fashion, style, beauty, etc. So it just really goes back to that ethos of yours and what makes sense for people to see. And this is a perfect spot to then kind of bridge the stories and the feed and create a curated landing page that I mentioned earlier. Number 7, I didn't even want to include this because I think it's so darn silly, but I see so many businesses, brands, even influencers with millions of followers who don't know this. So this is called Mind the Guides because as you can see in this video, as I drag my element, my text, there are little blue lines that show up. At the top is where my user profile name will be, and at the bottom is where the message box will be. If you put text or elements that need to be read under those places, they will not be seen by the end viewer. It's a very silly thing. I don't know if Android has it, but just know that keep the top and the bottom a little bit clear so that people can actually see your content. Otherwise, all your work will go to waste. Number 8 is something I harp on a lot, is to use a dedicated planning tool. A lot of people like to approach their Instagram very willy-nilly, and that's no way to bring a strategy to life. So I recommend using a third-party tool to plan out both your feed and you can plan out your stories. It will not auto-post your stories, but it will give you a notification when your stories are planned to go out in advance. By using a tool like this, by planning your content in advance, you can be more consistent, you can be more strategic, and make sure that your ethos is brought to life holistically. My favorite tool is the one that is shown here on a screenshot. It's called Later, Later. You can just search Later Instagram tool. I think it's the best of the ones I've tested, and it's a great way to plan out your content in advance and do it all at once so that you're not wondering in the morning, what should I post today? That should never be part of a marketer's question toolbox. So you can kind of see here how you would plan out your stories by grabbing your content and putting it in your calendar. Number 9 is a really important one, is to bridge your followers off of Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg owns your followers. You don't. So you want to create content strategies that bridge people into your email list. Because when you have their email, you can suddenly own a relationship. When they're just an Instagram follower, it's basically a crapshoot. The algorithm can change at any moment. You cannot reach that person anymore, and the relationship devolves. So you can do this really simply. This is from, I think, Nat Geo. They said it's easy to take plastic out of the picture. It's almost impossible to take it out of the ocean with a very compelling image. And then they have a pledge that people can sign by swiping up to sign it. If you don't have 10,000 followers yet, you don't have the swipe feature, then you have to direct people to the link in your bio. But I can't emphasize enough how important this is, because if the whole point of Instagram is to create relationships, you want to make sure you can own and nurture that relationship regardless of what happens with the platform. And lastly, number 10 is to go deeper. I've talked about this quite a bit already, but it's not enough just to post pretty pictures or just to post pithy quotes. You really need to dig deep into what that purpose is that motivates your brand, and then bring that to life in everything you do, both on the feed and especially in your stories. Because people now want transparency, they want authenticity, they want connection, and they also want to understand what it is you're offering to the world. So remember that everyone on this call is going to have a different ethos. And it all starts with answering these 3 questions. What does your audience care about? What makes you unique? And lastly, what does your brand stand for? Now, I know I just word vomited at you for 30 minutes. I could talk about this for probably 6 hours. So I put all the slides as well as a story strategy template up at this link. So if you want to download that, I put it at bit.ly/IG story local first. I created, I think, about a 10-page story strategy template that asks you some really good questions. You can sit down with your team, or if you're a solopreneur, do it on your own. And I also have a storyboard example for you so you can start to think strategically about how to plan out an individual story sequence. So you can download that there. If you have any questions, DM me on Instagram or email me. And that's it. I'm going to close my full screen. I'm going to come back into the chat. And Kendall, if you have any questions, then feel free to ask, and I'll hop back in here. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Just going to put in. We've got lots and lots of questions, Quinn. So I'm going to try.
Oh, okay.
To see if we can grab this.
Oh, lots of them, you guys.
Let's see here. Let's grab this one. I'm making a little list of questions here, so then we can make sure we got all of them.
Well, I can answer one while you set that up, and then I'll turn it back to you. There's one in here I saw. I heard using third-party posting tools like Hootsuite and HubSpot reduces your exposure and impressions. Yeah, I've heard that too. I'm just going to tell you now that there's a lot of rumors out there about things like this, and there's no way to substantiate them. And I think it's a little unfortunate that these things are out there because you can't really test it. I will say that with a HubSpot or Hootsuite or later, I believe all 3 of those are approved by Instagram. They're Instagram officially, sanctioned tools. So I can never imagine that Instagram would put the time and effort to ping or to say, oh, you're worst person or worst brand by using these tools when they're already approved. So I think it's a rumor. I don't think it can be tested. And the benefits outweigh the negatives because you can actually be strategic if you're in business and using Instagram as a marketing tool. So don't worry about it. But go ahead, Kendall, if you see more, we can take it from there.
Okay, we lost that one from Michelle. Is it better to put it live during the event or take more time?
Okay, you're a little far away, but I see it on the screen. So the question is it better to post live during the event or take more time and post after the event? Michelle, it's really up to you on what you prefer. I've tested this a bunch with myself as well with clients, and I find that I prefer to create the content at the event as far as like filming it, taking photos, getting ideas. But then I like to find a quiet 10 minutes maybe after the event or even during the event and just sit and actually create the content all at once. Because you'll start to see a drop off if you have people, if you're posting a story like an hour after and then another story an hour after, the continuity isn't quite there. So I would try to create the content all at once and then maybe do 3 or 4 slides and then come back doing 3 or 4 slides, because the more you do update, the more people will see it. So it's really up to you, but I think it's just a little more efficient and strategic to kind of do it in chunks like that. You're welcome, Michelle.
Perfect. Okay, and then we've got one from Shayla about balance of posting stories.
Oh, I find that some people get overwhelmed or annoyed with a brand or personal account has 30 stories lined up. How do you keep engagement up for people to watch your stories all the way through? Great question. Well, I think you do have to balance quality with quantity. If you have something super engaging that's 5 stories long and you see people stay all the way through, that gives you really good insight that that format worked. But I absolutely agree. I think people and brands put way too many slides and stories on at once, and you can immediately see the engagement drop. Usually about like 7, 8 slides in, maybe even less, you'll start to see your analytics go from forward and back to next story and exited because they're over it. So you just have to look at that specifically for your business and see what the insights say. But I would tell you that shorter is better because we're humans and we don't have the best attention span. But if you do post like throughout the day, like I mentioned in the last question, like 3 slides here, 4 slides here, I think that seems to do better because it comes up on people's feed more regularly. But 30 is way too much for anything. Next one. Any idea why IG doesn't allow uploading from a laptop? Or is that coming? Yeah, right? Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm waiting for direct messages where I can respond on my computer. That would be amazing because I can barely keep track sometimes. I don't know why. I think they're just probably building out certain things, especially with Instagram. It was always a mobile first app, like from the very beginning. And I think it would have stayed that way if Facebook hadn't purchased it. But now they're just trying to kind of combine the interfaces on the Facebook side of things, so you can do it on Facebook. I would say that for now, for you, I think Joan, this is you. I would look into a third-party tool because you can upload to, like, say, Later and have a whole media library that's filtered by tags and photo type and video type, and then plan out your content that way, which will also then auto post to your Instagram, so you don't even have to like deal with it at all. Also, you can have saved captions, which I use to have all my hashtags saved by category. So I would just recommend, if you want to do a little bit more on your desktop for planning, to use a third-party tool, because so far Instagram natively does not offer that. Next question. All right, Sean, what tool do you recommend for landing pages to use for swipe ups? Oh gosh, there's so many. The one I have more experience with that seems to do well is Unbounce. Unbounce, Unbounce. There's, gosh, Lead Pages. I thought it was a little clunky. I like Unbounce. I've also tried doing it on my own website or clients' websites, building a landing page there. But you have to do a lot more work to get like the conversion optimization to work. So using a tool like Unbounce is really great. I believe it's like $100 a month. So you get like tons of pages. So if you're doing quite a bit of conversion, driving conversions to those pages, then it's definitely worth it. So I would say Unbounce. Next one. Michelle, do you think a certain number of stories a week keeps a business relevant? Yes, yeah, same thing with the feed. I actually have changed my feed recommendations in the past 6 months. Before I said every day or like 5 times a week, and now I'm kind of like 3 times a week because the reach is so low on the feed and I'm seeing so much more attention in stories. So now I'm recommending, stories every day if you could, 3 posts on the feed every week. If that's too much for you, I would kind of do 3 and 3, 3 on the feed, 3 kind of story days a week. And as you get more, I'd say, expert at creating stories, it's going to be a lot easier for you. So you don't need to worry so much about planning things out unless there needs to be something really strategic. I guess I can share a little bit more personally. I do about 3 posts a week on my feed. Stories is a non-negotiable every day, other than maybe a Sunday, just because I like to piece out. And then I might do about one or 2 strategic stories a week. So that might be something more educational, something more along the lines of my ethos, versus 5 to 6 days of just kind of day in the life. where I'm just capturing my day, I'm just capturing my work, I'm not thinking too much about it. So it really just comes down to your strategy, but I would say to stay relevant at least 3 times a week. Next one. Marie, are there peak days of the week or times for IG use? Yes, but it depends on your business. So I can't quite say. I've seen clients who do really well on the weekend or at nights, whereas other clients more in a professional sense, it's like mornings on a weekday or lunchtime. So you really have to just test this both on your feed as well as stories to see where you're going to get the most engagement. And tools will tell you this. So if you're using excuse me, there's a fly. If you're using a third-party tool like Later, it also has analytics. And so you're going to start to see what your best times to post are. I think you have to post 50 times with one of those tools, and then it will calculate your best engagement. So if you're not using one of those tools, I recommend it. You can also do this manually if you don't have the budget for a tool by just testing different times a day and then on a spreadsheet, just looking at what your engagement is on those posts and start to see if there are any patterns. But every business is going to be different. I will say a general rule of thumb, if you're looking for it, is mornings, lunch, and like early evening is usually good. But some businesses do great on the weekend, so it really just depends. Next one. Okay. Oh, Maheen, I know you. We met years ago at, I think, a local first mixer. Hi, I hope you're doing well. I think you came to mine last year. So are you planning these day in the life stories or doing them without a strategy, or is the concept coming from a strategy? Absolutely. Everything I do, everything I teach my clients to do is strategic. So although it might not be like a planned out, curated, I'm going to sit down and teach you something right now, everything is going to be related back to, in my case, my personal brand. So I know generally what I'm going to be capturing. I'm not going to be capturing, certain personal things. I'm not going to be, sharing some of those things. But as soon as I'm sitting down to work, or I have a new project, or I'm biking to meet a client, these are all parts of my personal brand. So there is intention behind it. But maybe just not as much of a planned, kind of curated vibe. So, yes, I did your website, Maheen. That was so long ago. That was a fun design. Any other questions, or do we have time? I think we have time. I love questions. So, let's see. Later, does Later store engagement stats for stories? Yes, they do. I think IG it gets removed after like 3 weeks, maybe. I can't remember the number. I believe Later holds it for 3 months or longer. So yes, they hold the stats a lot longer. I highly recommend a third-party tool. I have a blog on my site comparing Later and Planoly. Planoly is another really popular tool out there, and I tested both of them, and I think Later is by far the best for many of the people on the call.